morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Into the Overhead. Today, Dean and I thought we should compile the list of questions that we've had on our YouTube videos, the Facebook comments, messages, text messages, carrier pigeons, just all kinds of avenues of communication we have open, and answer the questions that you guys have sent in, make a video out of it, and then see if maybe that triggers some more questions that we can answer next time. So I'm hosting today. I'm Josh, and I'm joined, of course, by Mr. Schneider. How are you doing, Dean?
I'm doing good, and I'm going to give you 5 stars today for pronouncing my last name correctly.
Schneider. I like to think of it as Schnitzel, but that's fine too.
I'm doing good, Josh. But listen, more importantly, I'm a little concerned for you. How you doing? Because I'm, as a redhead, I'm concerned for you.
My gingeritis is well under control. Don't worry. You see, it's going a little bit brown. I've been taking medication for it. Ridiculous.
And disclaimer for anybody who might get upset about the whole ginger thing: my son's a redhead too, so it's all fine.
Oh, that old excuse, huh? Okay. Well, my best friend's a ginger.
You're not really much of a redhead anymore. He's still like fire red.
I know. I saw the pizza photo. I was like, man, I miss those days.
Hey, Brett, if you can cut this out and put up a picture of my son.
And if you can't, then oh well.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get these questions going, huh?
Yeah.
Our first
teaching today.
Oh, Jesus. What excuses. Our first question is from FB Medic on YouTube. And his question is, regarding cave reels, what type do you need? How much line do they need? And how many should you carry? And I specifically said I was going to defer this one to you because I'm not a cave instructor. So, it just seems like a better idea to let you answer it. However, I did want to add into his question to talk about the ratio between like spools and reels, because I think just saying how many reels doesn't really answer the question. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, as a diver, you can still answer what you use and why you like what you use. But as an instructor, I tried the big 400-foot, big sidewinder reels and overhand reels. And I find that when I get students that come to me that don't have reels, rather than making them buy one, I'd rather they try both and see what they like. That being said, I often get some students that are smaller, like smaller guys or a lot of women. They have fairly small hands. So I found that Light Monkey sells a 200-foot cavern reel, what they call their cavern reel, that they offer an option on the website to spin it with a thinner line, a number 18 line. And when you do that, instead of the standard 24 line, instead of having 200 feet, I actually end up with about 310 feet on the reel, with still not even coming close to spilling over the side of the wall. So it's a much smaller reel as far as the Sidewinder reel. I think people have a much easier time across the board. It just works for a lot more people because it's not a big, bulky, clunky reel that smaller hands have trouble, handling and managing and controlling. So
okay,
that's what I use
for
primary.
What do you carry besides your primary? You got some jump spools. What you got?
It depends if I'm teaching or not. I usually have at least a spool or two, even if I'm teaching and not doing, or even if I'm teaching jumps, I'm not actually the person running the jumps, but I will carry a spool or two as a sacrificial. And a sacrificial spool is normally used just for broken line repair or navigating a line trap in the dark. Because if all you have is a primary reel and a safety, you don't really want to use your primary, because if you are, you're going to be using it to, run the reel into the cave, and your safety only comes off your ass to save your ass. So lost buddy and lost line, and that's it. So I don't use my safety reel for anything else.
So do you subscribe to the notion that only one primary reel is needed per team?
I do subscribe to the concept of if you don't need it, don't take it. It's just something else that can get lost or entangle you or, whatever. But if there is one in technical diving, it's none. And if you have two, it's one. So, if there's a 3-man team, you don't need 3 primaries. But if you do happen to foul a primary, you could just, set on the floor, run a different reel to the goal line if you're in a cave, and then, pick the other one up on the way out. But having one extra reel is not the big a deal.
Okay, fair enough. So, I carry my, gosh, what is my slide lock primary? I don't know, 250 or 400, something like that by Dive Right. And I've got a 100-ish foot safety reel that I like to carry, also a slide lock. And I've also got 2 and sometimes 3 of the glow in the dark spools from Dive Gear Express. I don't know if you've ever heard those. I don't know if the line actually glows in the dark. It probably does. And I'm sure it wouldn't be very helpful, but the concept was cool to me, so I bought them. Don't judge me.
So you're
But
one of those guys that buys something that's, oh, this is going to be a foul-proof reel, so you'll buy it, only to find that you can still foul it, right?
maybe.
You like
Okay, maybe.
You like
I like things that are cool. Well, I'm hanging out with you, aren't I? What a gimmick that is.
And that's today's episode of Into the
Fight. This became a fight cage match. Question for you.
Sure.
Do you tell your students to cut about 10 feet or so of line off their brand new reels and re-loop the end there?
All depends. If it's a brand new reel, spool, whatever it may be, sometimes they come from the factory with a big enough loop on the end that you can easily get the body of said device through the loop if you're, for when you're running it. And sometimes they don't. So if they don't, you should, cut it off and start a new loop and start from scratch. But there's also some other reasons. There's also some other reasons, like I do like to have a little pull loop on the very end of everything that has line on it. So when you tie it around something, it's not so tightly tied around that you can't just find a little piece of it and pull it off to open up the spool again or to untie.
Of course. You going to put a fuzzy dice on the end there?
No, because I already have one.
Excuse me.
Don't we all? So this is a demonstration of a loop that might even be just a little bit too small, because although it does have a little bit of space, it could probably use about 20% more. Just having to manipulate and spend time to do that is just a waste of a couple seconds here and there. But do that enough times, and then you end up with, instead of a couple seconds, you might end up with a minute or two. So
sure,
I'd rather spend
especially in a high flow or a task loaded situation. It's harder to get to a big spool through that small hole.
Absolutely. And then also when I tie the loop, I also make sure that one side is a little bit offset, so it's always easy to get a finger in there to get it separated. If most people will tie it tight and then it's like that, and then you got to try and get a nail in or whatever, I leave it a little bit offset.
I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting tactic.
You're welcome.
So while we're on the topic of reels,
That'll be
you know that You know that I don't believe in ocean diving. Pretty sure it's like sacrilege and taboo. But when you ocean dive, you take a different set of reels. Like not only a different type of reel, but do you actually physically take different reels for ocean than you do cave?
No. I take the same exact stuff. I have my stuff rigged as far as all of my reels and spools. So there are people that like to have a thicker line, like a 36 on their rec reels. Their rec reels, not recreational. They're rec reels when they go wreck diving. The line on my Light Monkey 200 is a number 18. I've been using it for 4 years. Granted, I don't do a ton of wreck diving. I've used it on the wrecks a few times, but even with limestone being porous and, really beat stuff up when you abrase stuff against it, it's just now after 4 years starting to get a little bit frayed where I have to think about relining it. So
that 36 is for abrasion resistance. Try to
just gives a little bit
resist cutting a little bit.
It doesn't resist it, but it just gives more you have to cut through before the line gives way totally. So, it's
Gotcha.
about twice as thick. So, theoretically it should last twice as long. I would rather do proper tie-offs in proper places where even if the boat is going up and down on the anchor line, I'm not going to tie to the anchor line, because then the line that I've tied to could be rubbing against something and abrase it much quicker. I'd rather tie to something static, and the only thing that might do it is people pulling on it or getting entangled in it and yanking on it too hard. But if you take your time and do things concisely and think about things as you're doing them, The very first time you do it, you don't know what you don't know. But as you practice more and more, you find things that don't work and you find better ways to do them so they do work.
Fair enough.
Does that make sense?
All right, move. It does indeed make sense. Anything else to say about reels before we move on? They're really cool.
I will say one other thing. Most of the time, manufacturers will spin, even if it's rated as a 200 or a 400 or an 800, they'll almost always be significantly more than that. Not like by like a foot, but if you order a 400, there's probably at least 410 or 420 feet on it, because I don't know anybody that would say, hey, I bought a 400 and it's got 425 feet on it. But if you bought a 400 and it's 399 and a half feet, people will complain. So
I'd be pretty upset about that.
That being said, hang on, let me go get a visual reference right here. So this is my 400 Halcyon that I have not used in quite some time. Very important, so you can see on the camera that you have some wall space here and that you don't have line loaded all the way to the edge. So you can see the space that
and that kind of Yep. So that feeds into the question I'd asked you earlier about whether you have your students cut off about 10 feet of line if on a brand new reel, because they sometimes come loaded all the way to the edge of the wall there. Yeah.
Right. And if they're loaded all the way to the wall when you get them, you're going to, let's say you run out 200 feet of line on a 400. If you're not careful to properly redistribute the line back onto the spool from left to right, you'll load one side up and then it will bind, and then you won't be able to run the reel because it'll just put the brakes on, so to speak. So I do recommend
get spillover.
Some line off so you have a little bit of space on the side walls. Whether it's a reel or a spool, doesn't make a difference.
All right. That concludes the segment about reels.
All right, see you later.
Hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, I don't need a Dean for the rest of these. So moving on. Question by David B on our YouTube. He's actually got 4 questions here, and his first question is, when should I start tech? And I think I'll let you answer. I think my answer to this is whenever you feel ready and meet agency and the instructor standards to do any type of tech diving. What do you think?
When should you start tech? I agree that it should be when you feel you're ready. You should feel fairly comfortable. Do you have to be 100% confident that you're going to pass? No, because training shouldn't be about whether.
That's what training is for.
No, it's not. Training is not for passing. Training is for becoming better.
No.
Yeah, so you shouldn't be concerned about passing.
Improving, yeah.
If you're not sure that you're going to pass, listen, swing for the fences. And if you come a little bit short, you might have to make up, 1 or 2 skills for another day. That's fine. But if you don't know you're going to pass, you're never going to know until you try, right? Depending on where you're from, the tech class that you start with and the actual path that you take might be different from somebody else in a different part of the country or a different part of the world. But when I did it, I went from open water and then all the advanced open water classes and specialties and all that stuff. And in the Northeast, where I was born as a diver, the first tech class that you would normally take is Intro to Tech, which is a course under the TDI umbrella. And it introduces you to back-mounted doubles, back then anyway, up north. Side mount, not really a thing up there on a regular basis because there are no caves. It's mostly wreck diving if you're going to go out on a boat. There's not a lot of reefs. So you're pretty much a wreck diver if you're in the Northeast. So to do that on a boat, and I agree with this, if you're on a boat, back-mounted doubles is definitely a better solution, especially in the beginning, because side mount in big seas and those tanks are swinging and swaying. You beat the crap out of the boat. You're going to get yourself on the boat as full list. The captain's going to not want you back anymore. So a lot of people went for back-mounted doubles. Intro to Tech introduces you to back-mounted doubles and anti-finning techniques, which help when there's any kind of particulate on the floor inside a wreck or down here inside a cave. So that's where I started off. Where this gentleman would start off, I'm not sure. I don't know where he's from. But as long as you feel comfortable and you think you got a good chance of doing well in the class, again, everybody listening, please don't be concerned about passing. Please don't think, hey, Mr. Instructor, here's my money. Where's my card? Right? You pay the money so they can teach you, so you can get better. And when you're better, that's your instructor's call. That's not yours. You can't turn around and say, well, I paid you for a class or a card. No, you didn't. You're paying for training. And if you feel like you didn't get the training that you expected, different story. This goes back to previous conversations we've had, Josh, with listeners, that if you're thinking of taking a class or getting some training, you should interview the instructor, find out what they're all about, find out how they teach, where they're going to teach, what you're going to have to do, find out where their level of expectation is for you to actually pass. Because if they tell you, oh, you just need to do good, okay, I need a better definition.
Yeah, you just need to try. As long as you try, I'll issue you a card.
But like for me, I won't give a full cave card if you can't do an efficient back kick. I don't expect that at Intro to Tech. I just need to see you try and demonstrate that you kind of understand the mechanics. Then you go out and practice before you come back for advanced nitrox or the next level of training. So that's my thoughts on it.
Gotcha. So interestingly, that was the second question, which is how to find a tech instructor. Do you have anything to expand on what you just said, or do you feel like that was sufficient to answer both?
Same way you would find the recreational instructor. Any instructor you're thinking of.
Yeah, and we've talked about that.
And any instructor you're thinking of using for any type of training, if you don't know them, and I will say, if I get a cavern student, almost always that student will come back for all the levels of overhead training. Every once in a while, the student will want to go out and interview other instructors and maybe take a class with some other instructors here and there, get different instructors' perspectives. That's all fine and good. As long as you interview them and their expectations line up with your expectations and your personalities mold at least a little bit, then it's your call. But you should definitely be going through those steps. Don't just say, oh, yeah, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, it's you,
Eeny, meeny, miny, Dean. Got it.
Okay. as long as Larry and Curly didn't pass that class. So
no, for sure, I was there. So hey, interesting topic you brought up, which is looking for other instructors after you've taken your first overhead course with somebody else. You might be surprised, although you probably won't be surprised, that there are instructors out there that won't train you if you train with other instructors after them. How do you feel about that? Is that you? Are you that guy?
no.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, you just said they can go take classes with other people.
They most certainly can, and there's nothing wrong with it. I am not one of those guys that if you come to me for a class and then you go to someone else for a class and then you come back to me for another class, I'm not going to not train you. I'm going to definitely ask you, hey, if you took Cavern with me, how come you went and did intro with somebody else? They might say, hey, I wanted a different.
And why are you coming back?
Right. Well, how come you're coming back then? Why don't you go to a third instructor? Honestly,
fair enough.
I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I have asked students that in the past, and they've told me point blank they weren't as good as I thought. That's not to say
I must have been the instructor.
Let me say something. That's not to say that they were any better or worse than me. They just weren't as good as they thought they were going to be. So,
for sure, high expectations.
I
make for good letdowns.
When I did all of my overhead training, I did it with, anybody that knows me already knows that I've done all my overhead instructorships with Ed Sorensen at Cave Adventurers. I teach through Cave Adventurers. Mm-hmm. He has very high standards, which just parlayed down into my teaching. I am a very strict instructor. Students have asked me, hey, was that you cursing underwater? Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was me.
I say that quite a bit.
Great.
They come back to me for a reason. I don't want the student that wants an instructor that says, hey, great job. Here's your card. Just go work on these 17 things. You'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like I said before, if you can't do a helicopter turn in the same exact spot, if you can't do a backup mass deployment and move less than 12 inches, you're not going to get a full cave card from me. And that's cave specific, but wow. I have really strict standards.
Of course.
I did an A&DP class in the Gulf of Mexico with someone who I consider a very dear friend. I'll tell you his first name is David. If he listens, he'll know who it is. Everything else he did was spot on. But when it came to deploying his lift bag from 100 feet, he started at 100 feet. And when he was done, he was at 110 feet or 109 feet. I told him, I can't give you a card. If you can go a 10% depth change, why wouldn't it be 15 if you got a little bit more delayed, or 20? You know, that big of a depth change, if you're not paying close enough attention, it could end up affecting you in a very negative way. So,
gotcha. Yeah. And to your point about certifications, right? So to the listeners, your certification is a license to learn and improve, right? But to Dean's point, it's not an excuse for an instructor to get you out of the water and move you on so that he can take the next student. You see what I'm saying? So yes, you know, mastery of skills is a thing, but you can always get better. Dean can get better. I can get better. We can all get better, right? And the certification allows us to practice so we can get better, but it's not a substitute for continued training until you meet the objectives, which is what he was talking about. Because some instructors will just say, hey, you know, you didn't quite meet the standards, but it's enough for me to issue you a certification. Good luck getting caught up. Here's your card. Goodbye.
My least favorite, and probably the most common, this is just my opinion, all over the place. Hey, Josh, man, congrats on your open water. You did awesome. By the way, we got a peak performance buoyancy class next week. You should join. No.
Yes.
You have good enough buoyancy.
Yes, I feel that way too.
Your open water class. Plain and simple.
Completely agree. 1000% agree. I mean, buoyancy should be the foundation of your open water class. Absolutely agree. And by the way, when it comes to finding tech instructors there, David, another thing you can do, I don't know if it's talked about often, you can actually call the agency. Call your regional office and ask for some recommendations, and you can start there. You know, when we wanted to get into overhead, we had no idea. We did not know any tech instructors at all, let alone overhead instructors. So we called TDI, and they gave us a list of names, and then we started doing our interviews. So you can do that. That's an option.
Some agencies don't have it, but SDI and TDI, which is owned by ITI, International Training Incorporated, something like that, that you can actually just go right to their website. Mm-hmm. And you could say, find an instructor. Yep. You could tell them what course and where you're located as far as country and state or region. And they will give you all of the instructors that have that certification or that training that they're able to do, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that access is, it's invaluable for sure. Now, it's great access. All right,
I'm sorry, just give me one more second. If you call the agency,
okay.
You might be able to get someone's actual opinion on who might be a better fit. Obviously, just looking at the website just gives you a photo and the classes that instructor can teach. So it's not going to give you any other feedback other than a list to start with of who you can start calling to interview.
But hey, it's still better than being like, well, I want to do this, but I have no idea how to. So you fall on Google. So the third question from David is, when is it time to get a rebreather? And the time is now, David. No, I'm kidding. The time is when you have a need for it, when you meet the standards of safety and I want to say diligence when it comes to your diving that's required to dive something that wants to kill you and also keep you alive at the same time. They're very, what's the word I'm looking for here? They're very two-faced in that way. They're dangerous and safe at the same time. Go ahead, Dean. I can see you want to yell at me.
I'm not going to yell at you. I'll just pick you up later. So you said that's trying to kill you and keep you alive at the same time. I kind of disagree with that a little bit. I have been taught when I did my rebreather class, rebreather is doing nothing but trying to kill you all the time. It's up to you to maintain it and keep it from doing so. Now, let me clarify that for the people that don't know much about rebreathers. It's not going to grow arms or hands come out of the loops and choke you out. It's just, it does certain things, but it doesn't make the decision to do them on its own. If it goes down a path, let's just say if the PO2 or the PPO2 starts to go too high or too low, it doesn't know how to fix it unless you're diving an electronic CCR. But a manual CCR, you must maintain and fly yourself all the time. There are electronic CCRs that use O2 sensors or O2 cells to read the content of oxygen in the mix, and then they can trigger solenoids to open and close different ports to put DIL or O2 into the mix. But anything that's made by man and anything that's been made by God will eventually fail. And if those things fail, you need to be able to fly that thing manually anyway or bail out. But it is definitely on you. It's your onus. It's your machine. It's your dive. It's your unit. You did the training. It's all on you to make sure that thing doesn't kill you and you keep yourself alive.
Yeah, and that goes back to the diligence thing, right? Because just like you said, the electronic CCR can do a lot of the work for you, but once something fails, the whole unit is basically manual, and you really have to be um, hyper vigilant. That's really the word I was looking for earlier. Hyper vigilant when it comes to maintaining your PPO2 by yourself to ensure you can exit safely. And also, to one more point, when it comes to when is it time to get a rebreather. Um, I made this mistake, I think, when I got my first rebreather. And so I would encourage people not to do this. And that is, don't go out and purchase a rebreather until you can afford to purchase the accompanying gear that you're going to need. Maybe that's a new harness or whatever, the full training that you're going to need, the sorb, O2 bottles, O2, all of the things. Don't go out and just buy a rebreather and have it sitting around tempting you to do something stupid, which I did for sure, 100%. Be able to afford all the things that you're going to need. Talk to a CCR instructor so they can tell you the entire list of what you're going to need. Price it out, and then when you can afford all of that stuff and have a little wiggle room for during your training when things are inevitably going to happen, then get a rebreather. And that's just the cost portion of it.
I agree with that. Like just a perfect example, I was one of the students of the very first Sidewinder class ever done. It was me and Bill Dunn, who used to be on the board of the CDS. If you guys don't know him, look him up. He's been around in cave diving for decades. Ed Sorensen was the instructor, who is the guy that Mike Young went to and said, hey, here's my back-mounted Spirit rebreather. Can we turn this into a side mount unit? I think like a year or two later, they came out with the Sidewinder. So Bill and I were in the first class, and the rebreather alone, just the components from KISS, was $4,995. By the time you put an O2 bottle on it and all the hoses and fittings and MAVs and all the other accessories and training, it was around like $9,000, if I recall correctly. So just because a breather is $5,000, that's not going to come anywhere near what your total expense is going to be to get into that unit safely with proper training. Definitely think, Josh, you're 100% right.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you discuss in an open conversation with one or two different instructors and maybe even some other divers who are already trained by that instructor or others, but on that same unit. Hey, what's your total cost of a dive these days? Make sure it's going to be cost effective. People think that breathers will, once you own them and you're trained on them, they can, but people will, it'll lower the cost of your diving. And on a per dive basis, maybe, but guess what? Once a year, you got to replace $200 or $300 worth of O2 sensors, and
or more, depending on what unit you have. So $400 for mine.
And then every time you pack your unit, or if you use one of those, what are those cartridges called? Extend-Airs? Yeah.
The Extend-Air. Yeah, Extend-Air, yep. Yeah, $35 a pop. Yep.
And I use Sorb, so I don't have a canister that sits into or I don't have a cartridge that sits into the canisters of the rebreather. I've got a pack with Sorb, which is, for those that don't know, it's kind of looks like kitty litter or oil dry or whatever you want to call it.
I always say that.
Pour it in, and it costs about $15-ish in Sorb. And if I do like an hour and a half dive one day, I might do another hour or two the next day. But you can't just leave that in there until you hit the absolute limit of the Sorb. You want to repack that on a fairly regular basis. So, if I do a dive a week, that's $15 or $20 a week in Sorb. You have to consider all of that. Hose fittings that start leaking, you have to fix that. Any little tiny malfunction can really be a much larger issue on a rebreather than open circuit. So you should never, ever, ever.
And those very, very tiny, very thin mushroom valves that come on your DSV, which is the part that goes into your mouth that connects to your loop hoses. You clean out, and this is not a CCR instructional class, obviously, okay, guys, but you go to clean out your DSV, and this has happened to me. You clean your DSV out, and you stick it on your counter for it to dry, and you put it such that the inhale side of the mushroom valve is down, and it's got water on it. You come out the next day, and your mushroom valve is deformed. Now you need a new mushroom valve. And granted, they're not that much money, but the point is, like, little things like that cascade into expensive problems. So, and I'm saying this from experience.
Valve, if you could find the exact mushroom valve in, let's say if you found it in a hobby shop or whatever, because it's used for another application, it's probably like 17 cents. But if you get it from a rebreather manufacturer, it's probably like $170. So things are exponentially more expensive when they're for a rebreather. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, can we take a minute? I just want to point something out. About maybe like 2 minutes ago, Dean said something that we didn't really like take a second to just take in. He said, "Josh, you're 100% right." So just making sure that we all heard that. Comment down below if you didn't hear that, and then go back and make sure.
Spike my coffee.
What's the problem here, Dean? No. Maybe you just haven't had enough coffee to think clearly yet. That could be the problem.
Alcohol in here or something. I don't recall saying that. I'm gonna have to wait. If
you said it.
If there's proof, great. Otherwise,
Britain, edit it out.
Josh,
censor Dean on that one.
Hey Heather, can you hit the delete button?
Holding on. Last question from David, and that is, what are the benefits of OC Tech versus CCR Tech? Now, I've always taken this question, because I've had it for a few days, obviously. I've taken this question to mean, how do I decide on a per dive basis whether a rebreather or open circuit is better suited to me? Now, my opinion, I think we've talked about this before, and that really depends on what your gas requirements are for that dive. There's a difference between carrying enough gas to get all the way in, and like open circuit gas to get all the way in and all the way out, versus carrying enough open circuit gas to exit, knowing that you'll enter on CCR. But again, that depends on the environment, your level of training, and what your dive is for.
Curious as to, because it may warrant a different answer, even slightly different. What technical training are we talking about? What specific training?
Sure. Yeah, and it doesn't say, so maybe let's just talk about cave, because I know David wants to get into cave. So from a cave perspective, when do you say this cave dive needs CCR, and when do you say this cave dive needs open circuit? Although I know there are some people out there that dive CCR exclusively in caves. Are you one of those?
Because I am not yet an instructor on the Sidewinder,
okay.
I cannot teach anything while using my Sidewinder. I have to be open circuit when I'm teaching, which I'm fine with. I'm totally fine with that.
Okay.
I spend so much of my attention on the students. I wouldn't want to have to worry about maintaining my own PPO2, and the Sidewinder is a manual CCR, so it will not do anything for me. I don't want one that is going to take care of me, and I've never thought of myself this way, but if you are the type of person that can easily become complacent, you kind of just forget that those solenoids are firing for you, and you're just enjoying your dive, and you just become so dependent, and that golden parachute will save you until, guess what? Someday those solenoids are not going to work, or they're going to work when they're not supposed to, and they're going to fire when they're not supposed to. And if I don't want to have to worry about keeping myself alive on a rebreather while I'm trying to keep a student or two students or three students alive in class.
Other people.
So once I'm done
gotcha.
With my Sidewinder instructorship, which I did start like at the beginning of COVID, and then I put the brakes on because COVID kind of threw a wrench in everything. And I have just recently restarted again. Once I'm done with that, I will teach classes on the Sidewinder, but probably only if I'm teaching a Sidewinder class. So if my students are open circuit, I think I'd be open circuit.
So on a personal diver level, do you ever do cave dives just as Dean the diver, not Dean the instructor? Do you ever do cave dives on open circuit?
Absolutely.
And without let me ask it this way: do you ever dive open circuit cave dives with your KISS rebreather being perfectly functional at home? Totally possible that you could have taken it, but you just didn't want to.
Maybe I'm going on a cave dive with Josh, and Josh is not comfortable with rebreathers because he knows nothing about them. Hey, you know what? I really don't know anything about. I'd rather not be. Okay, I'll dive open circuit. I'll dive open circuit.
Mixed teams, yeah, I gotcha.
If it's someone who's comfortable with it, even if they don't have experience, I'll tell them, look, if you find me unresponsive, if the DSV's in, leave it in. If it's out, clip me to a line and go out. Just Seriously.
Okay.
And I'm not breathing. If we're 3,000 feet or 2,000 feet back in a cave, what are you going to do? All you can do, clip me.
Yeah. Yep. I guess I'm going to clip you to the line.
Ed's going to have to call Shelby and whoa. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Poor Ed. Poor me too, because I was with you. I'm pretty sure Shelby will stab me. But hey,
clip to a line. What the hell's wrong with you?
Well, I'll replay this episode. You said to clip me to a line. Hey, David, if you have a specific scenario you'd like to ask about, put that in the comments of this video, and then it'll probably be Dean because it's a CCR Tech thing. We'll reply unless it's a diver level question. Then I'd be happy to reply. Moving on, because we're over halfway through the episode and we've gotten through like 5 questions. Britton, who is our wonderful video editor. Thank you so much, Britton, for taking care of us with the video editing and the intros. And I don't actually know what you do, but for all the stuff that you do, I said do. Thanks for that, man. I did, because I'm mature. I can say those things. Britton would like to know, what is your favorite dive site, Mr. Dean and Mr. Josh? And I'm going to go with mine first. And mine is Jug Hole. Jug Hole is a beautiful cave in Fort White, Florida. I think, oh my God, I think it's called Ichetucknee, or maybe it's Icatucknee. I'm not really sure how to say the state park name, but I love it. It's a little bit of a long walk to get there, but the cave is small. It's beautiful. It's got it has what I would consider fun restrictions, not like, holy crap, this is insane. I don't know if I even want to go through this type of restrictions, but they're fun. The bedding plane is fun. The diamond sand restriction is fun to navigate. And overall, the cave is short and beautiful. And I feel like you can spend a lot of time in there with very little gas. So I love Jug Hole. Now, Dean, what are you thinking? What's your fave?
I've been in Jug Hole 2 or 3 times. Twice just for some photos in the cavern, which is, it is a beautiful photo spot. It is
Photoshop.
Photogenic caverns on a nice sunny day. The rays of light come through the opening, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I've only been beyond the bedding plane
For
once.
sure.
So yeah, and it was the very first time. So I was paying attention to a lot of the cave, but not paying attention to the beauty of it. I was trying to study, the surroundings, because the
responsible cave diver thing to do, for sure.
In my opinion,
100%.
Line aware, light aware, and cave aware. So my first few times in a cave, I'm paying attention to where the line is and making sure that it's good and making sure that it's not in the sand or the silt or the dirt. So, if it's buried, you can't tell what condition that line is in that one spot. So I do a lot more than just enjoy the cave, my first few times in, as I learn the cave and study it. So I was just going to say,
sounds like I need to get you in there again.
Tell you much of the cave actually anymore, because it's actually been, I don't know, probably 6 years since I've been in it. So I'd be happy to go with you again. Now, as far as my favorite cave, I don't really have one. There's so many passages and so many different caves that I love. But if I could take like Kings Canyon out of Jackson Blue and Rocky Horror out of Madison, I don't know, the White Room at Ginny, I have favorite places. I have favorite places.
I like the White Room.
Let's just call it that. I don't have one specific favorite cave. If someone put a gun to my head and said, "Shut up and pick one,"
sure, fair enough.
I'd probably have to say
that'd be me. I would do that. Just say Florida. Florida's your favorite cave.
There we go.
Boom. Yeah. Oh man. So speaking of the White Room, I like the White Room. You go in there, just hover by the campfire, warm your hands up. You know what I'm talking about, right? No. Well, you said the White Room in Ginny. If you go into the White Room in Ginny, there is a circle of rocks and there's some sticks sticking up in a teepee formation.
Water, and that cannot be fire to warm your hands up, right?
Oh. Have you not watched SpongeBob? Are you kidding me right now? Yes, you absolutely can. Jesus.
Since
educate yourself, man.
We're expecting to finally get, hopefully, a final revision of our Into the Overhead logo today. but we'll see.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right. So it looks like you're running low on time. So I'll ask the last question, which I think is pretty important here. Andrew S. wants to know, what are your guys' opinions on sliding D-rings on the waist for side mount? My K2 came with fixed D-rings, but I'm thinking of changing to sliding D-rings like the X-Deep has. I'll defer this one to you. So for me, okay, and if okay is Dean's answer, my answer is if you're not diving with aluminum tanks, you don't need sliding D-rings.
I couldn't say if it's a good idea or a bad idea unless I know where he's going to be diving and what types of tanks he's going to be diving. So yeah, sliding D-rings
configuration and such. Yeah,
one of the possible solutions to diving aluminum tanks, because when there's 3 grand in them, 3,000 psi, they're heavy and they're a little negative. But as you breathe them, and with side mount, we switch regs back and forth to keep our tanks in balance because gas has weight. So as you breathe them, the tail gets lighter than the top, because the top has the valve in the first stage, so that weights that down, but the tail will
valve, yeah.
So once it starts getting light at about 16, 17, 1800 psi, you would have to either unclip from the back D-rings and clip to the front D-rings if you're using 2 connection points, or if you have sliding D-rings, you'd have to just reach up and pull them down so it holds the tanks down because they're starting to get floaty. So without knowing specifics about where and how, then I really couldn't say. But if it works for you, and anything, if it works for you, go for it.
Awesome. So it looks like we're right about time because I've got some stuff to do. Dean's got some teaching to do. Let me ask you guys a question. This is going to be about a 43-minute video. What do you guys think about this time frame? You think that we should have continued on, obviously given time, to make that hour? Or do you prefer the hour? Do you like the shorter form? And if you want, Dean and I will go ahead and do the part 2 for this and answer the rest of the questions and then upload that at a later time. But let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe button, etc. Blah, blah, blah.
Thanks for
Dean, take us out.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Into the Overhead. I'm Dean Olmschneider, checking out with my buddy Josh Underwood. And don't forget, everybody, dive as if.